My name is Nancy Roberts, and I'm a professor of economics at Arizona State University. Today's discussion is going to be about the concept called elasticity. We have three measures of elasticity, three main measures of elasticity that we're going to discuss. The first one is price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply. The second one is elasticity of income, and the final one is what we call cross-price elasticity. And then once we've discussed all of those, we're going to talk about one of the reasons why measures of elasticity are so important. So the concept of elasticity is basically understanding how demand responds to changes in price, or how supply responds to changes in price. Now, we know about the law of demand. As price increases, ceteris paribus, quantity demanded decreases. But depending on what the good is, the response to the change in price will be very different. For example, let's have two demand curves up here. This one will be the demand for Kellogg's cornflakes. Kellogg's cornflakes. This is demand for Kellogg's cornflakes. And over here, I'm going to put the demand for gasoline. Two goods that we all buy. Now, the question is, how much will quantity demanded decrease if we increase price? And so what we want to do is look at the difference in responsiveness to these two products when the price increases. So let's just say the price increases from P1 to P2, and I want to use those same prices over here, P1, P2, and let's look at the responsiveness in each of these two markets. If the price is P1, that's the quantity that will be bought. If the price goes up to P2, of course, quantity demanded is going to fall, and there's the response in the market for Kellogg's cornflakes to a price increase this big. Let's go over here to the demand for gasoline and increase price by the same amount. Here at price 1 is Q1. Price goes up to P2, and as we know, quantity demanded falls. But look at the response. Compare this response to this response. These consumers of Kellogg's cornflakes are much more responsive to changes in price than are the consumers of gasoline. And so what we would say is that this demand curve is relatively elastic, relatively sensitive, relatively responsive to changes in price. This demand curve is relatively inelastic, relatively unresponsive, relatively insensitive to increases in price. This doesn't mean they like increases in price. It just means that they respond differently. And so what we have are different responses, and if we look at the underlying reasons why the responses are different, it'll help us understand this. And so we talk about what are the determinants of elasticity. What determines that this is much more elastic than this? And so if we list the determinants, of elasticity of demand, the first one is the number of substitutes. How many substitutes are there for Kellogg's cornflakes? There's so many choices in cereal. You can't even find the Kellogg's cornflakes on the shelf. There's like 45 different kinds of cereals. What are the substitutes for gasoline? Well, you can walk or take public transit or ride a bike. So if the greater the number of substitutes, the more elastic, because you have other choice. If the price of Kellogg's Corn Flakes goes up, buy Post Toasties. So number of substitutes are very important. Another thing that's very important is the good in question a luxury or a necessity? So it's a luxury, or is it a necessity? Luxury or necessity. For example, if instead of gasoline, what if we'd had insulin over here? If you're a diabetic, insulin's a necessity. And so if the price of insulin goes up, since it's a necessity, you're going to find other things to cut back on, not insulin. And so goods that are luxuries, it's like they're not as important as a necessity. And so if the price of a luxury goes up, we'll just do without more than we will if it's a necessity. The third determinant of elasticity is the percentage of your budget that this item consumes. So for example, if I have a shopping list and when I leave campus today, I have two things on my list. The first one is a box of paper clips. So I go to Best Buy, I go in and they have paper clips and they cost $1 a box. And I say, $1 a box? I could save 10% if I went to Walgreens. Am I going to Walgreens to save 10% on a $1 box of paper clips? No. So I buy my paper clips. Next thing on my shopping list is a new Jaguar. And so I go to the Jaguar place down on 64th Street in McDowell. And I say, oh, there's the car I want. And he says, that will be $94,000. And I say, $94,000? I could save 10% if I go to Glendale and get the Jaguar. Am I going to Glendale to save 10% on a Jaguar? Yes, because the Jaguar consumes a much larger portion of my budget. So if the item is a small budget item, you care much less about saving on the price. And the last determinant is time. Over time, the demand for everything becomes more elastic. And, the demand for insulin will become more elastic because we will discover substitutes for insulin. We will discover ways to prevent diabetes so that the demand for insulin will change and become much more elastic over time. In the next lecture, we will go into some detail about how to measure these elasticities and we'll start with elasticity of demand.